The stars above Shafara were breathtaking, their bright lights scattered like jewels across the vast expanse of space. Yet, despite the beauty that surrounded her, Princess Zorla felt a sense of emptiness. As the heir to the Thalrex Empire, she was expected to marry into power, to forge alliances that would ensure the strength of her people. But none of the suitors who sought her hand ever seemed to touch her heart. They were warriors, diplomats, and rulers of distant planets, each offering more wealth and influence than the last. Yet, she felt none of them understood her, not truly. Her people, the Thalrex, were known for their wisdom and advanced technology. They had traveled to countless galaxies, but it was on a peaceful mission to the planet Earth that Zorla's life would take an unexpected turn. The mission was simple enough: study the planet's culture, observe its people, and report back to the Empire. Zorla had no particular expectations for the trip. Earth was a small, somewhat primitive world compared to the stars she knew so well. Yet as she descended from the sleek silver craft, her gaze fell upon a human named Lucas, a man with eyes full of curiosity, kindness, and a strength that was not measured in power or wealth, but in his spirit. Zorla had heard of humans before. Of course. Their reputation for resilience, creativity, and defiance against all odds had reached the ears of the Thalrex long ago. Yet, standing in front of her now, Lucas was not like the other humans she had read about. He was different. His warm, genuine smile made her feel something she had never felt before, a connection that was beyond mere diplomatic interest. Lucas had no knowledge of who she truly was. To him, Zorla was just a mysterious, beautiful stranger who had arrived, in the middle of nowhere. He didn't know she was a princess, nor did he care. He was a simple scientist, one who had spent his life studying the stars and wondering if life existed beyond his world. He never expected that the answer would come in the form of a princess from another galaxy. Their first conversation was awkward, but charming. Zorla had tried her best to keep her royal composure, but Lucas had a way of making her laugh, something no one had done in years. They talked about Earth, its history, and its people, and in turn, Zorla shared stories of her travels across the cosmos. The more they spoke, the more she realized how much she enjoyed his company. Zorla's heart began to race whenever Lucas looked at her, and it confused her. She had been raised to view relationships through the lens of duty, not affection. But with him, everything felt different. There was no hidden agenda, no political game to play. There was just a simple connection between two beings from different worlds, and that alone was enough to make her feel something she had never experienced before. As the days passed, their bond grew stronger. Zorla began to explore Earth in ways she never thought possible. She learned about its forests, its oceans, and its cities, but most importantly, she learned about the kindness and resilience of its people through Lucas. He showed her the beauty in the simplest things, the way the sun set over the horizon, how laughter could bring even the darkest hearts to life, and how love could flourish between the most unlikely of souls. Zorla knew she was changing, and she wasn't sure if that change was for the better or the worse. She had always thought her destiny was written in the stars, that her role as a princess was carved into the very fabric of the universe. But Lucas made her wonder if her fate had always been her own to choose. Could she truly change the path laid before her? As the mission drew to a close, Zorla found herself torn. Her time on Earth was coming to an end, and she had to return to her people, to her duty. But Lucas had given her something that no other suitor or ruler had ever been able to offer: a choice. And as she stood on the rooftop of a tall building, gazing up at the stars, Zorla couldn't help but wonder if her heart was now forever bound to this small yet beautiful world. Would she return to her people, to her duty? Or would she choose a life filled with love, uncertainty, and the unknown? Lucas was waiting for her below, his eyes full of hope and anticipation. Zorla took a deep breath and made her decision. The days that followed were filled with a growing sense of uncertainty. Zorla had always known what her life would be like. As the heir to the Thalrex Empire, her destiny was predetermined. She was meant to return to her people and take her place, beside a suitable ruler, strengthening the Empire's power and influence. It was a role she had been groomed for since birth, one that left little room for personal desires. But Lucas had changed that. Zorla had spent countless hours alone, gazing up at the stars, her mind torn between the life she knew and the life she could have with him. The connection between them was undeniable, and yet the weight of her royal obligations could not be ignored. She was the future of her people, and their survival depended on the decisions she made. Could she really walk away from that for the sake of a love that had bloomed so unexpectedly? One evening, as the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Zorla found herself once again on the rooftop, looking out at the world that seemed so small and fragile compared to the vastness of the universe. Below, Lucas waited, his figure silhouetted against the glowing city lights. She could see the hope in his eyes, the way he believed in them, in their bond. It made her heart ache. She took a deep breath and stepped away from the edge, walking towards the elevator that would take her down to where Lucas stood. As she approached him, she felt a nervous flutter in her chest, something she hadn't felt before. Her life had always been controlled, predictable. But Lucas was different. He made her feel like she was finally living. "Zorla," Lucas said softly as she reached him, his voice warm and full of care. He smiled, his hands reaching out to gently take hers. "I've been waiting for you." The sound of his voice sent a ripple of comfort through her, but it was also a reminder of the choice she now had to make. It was no longer just about her own happiness. It was about the future of the Thalrex Empire and the people who depended on her. I don't know what to do, Lucas," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "I never imagined a life like this with someone like you. But I've been raised to follow a certain path, a path that will keep my people strong, but one that may leave my heart empty." Lucas's expression softened as he stepped closer, his hands still holding hers. "You don't have to choose between your duty and your happiness. You can have both, Zorla. You can still be a leader, and you can be with me. I'll support you, no matter what." Zorla shook her head, the weight of her royal responsibilities heavy on her shoulders. "It's not that simple. If I choose to stay with you, I risk everything. My people, my place in the galaxy. They all depend on the decisions I make." "You don't have to carry that burden alone," Lucas said, his voice filled with sincerity. "I may not be from your world, but I believe in you. I believe in us. You don't have to sacrifice who you are to lead your people. The Thalrex are strong because of you, and they will still be strong with you by their side, whether you're ruling from your throne or standing next to me." His words were like a balm to the fire of doubt that had been burning in Zorla's mind. She had never considered that she could balance both worlds, but something in Lucas's eyes made her believe it could be possible. It was a new kind of hope, one that she had never experienced before. "I want to believe that," Zorla whispered. "But what if I'm wrong? What if my people can't accept me if I'm not the ruler they expect?" "You're more than just a ruler, Zorla. You're a person with a heart that wants to love, to be loved. That's what will make you a great leader, not your title, but your courage to follow your heart." Zorla closed her eyes for a moment, letting his words sink in. The life she had known seemed so distant now, almost like a dream. She had always felt isolated, surrounded by people who didn't understand her. But with Lucas, she had felt something real, something that wasn't about power or duty, but about connection. She opened her eyes and looked up at him, seeing not just the human scientist who had captured her heart, but the man who had given, her the strength to imagine a future beyond her royal cage. "I have to go back," Zorla said quietly. "I have to speak with my people. But I'll come back to you, Lucas. No matter what happens, I will choose a path where I don't have to. Give up who I am." Lucas's eyes lit up with relief and hope. "I'll be waiting for you, Zorla. Always." With one final, lingering kiss, Zorla knew that her decision had been made. She would return to her people, but not as the person they expected her to be. She would be herself, a leader who understood the value of love and the power it could bring to even the most difficult decisions. The stars above seemed to glow a little brighter as she made her way back to her ship. Her heart was heavy, but it was also full of the knowledge that the future was hers to shape. No matter how difficult the path ahead, she would walk it with Lucas by her side, and for the first time in her life, Zorla felt truly free. Zorla's return to her people was a bittersweet one. As the ship descended back to Thalrex's capital planet, the weight of her responsibilities returned with a vengeance. The familiar landscape of towering spires and the shimmering cities of the Thalrex Empire loomed beneath her, but they no longer filled her with the same sense of pride they once had. The Empire, for all its power and grandeur, now felt like a gilded cage. She had spent countless hours during her journey home wondering how she could balance her role as princess with the life she longed to lead. Could she truly follow her heart without sacrificing everything? The bond she shared with Lucas was unlike anything she had ever known, and yet her duty to her people called to her in a voice she could not ignore. As Zorla stepped off her ship, she was greeted by her council, a group of advisors and elders who had watched over her since birth. They were well-dressed, their ornate robes signifying their high rank, but there was no warmth in their greetings. Their eyes were cold, focused solely on the formalities that came with her return. "Princess Zorla, welcome back," said General Raltek, a stern man who had always believed in the strength of the Thalrex Empire above all else. "We have much to discuss. Your presence is required in the Great Hall." Zorla nodded, her heart heavy. She had known this moment would come, but it still made her uneasy. Her people expected her to be a leader, a ruler who could bring power and order to their empire. But as she followed Raltek and the council members into the Grand Hall, she felt more like a stranger in her own home. The Great Hall was magnificent, with its vaulted ceilings and shimmering walls of crystal. At the center of the room stood the council, an assembly of the most influential figures in the Thalrex Empire. They turned to face her as she entered, their expressions unreadable. "Princess Zorla," said High Advisor Sira, the oldest and wisest of the council. "You have returned from your mission. We trust it was successful?" Zorla glanced around the room at the faces she had known all her life. They were expectant, waiting for her to take her rightful place among them. But Zorla felt out of place. She had spent so many years preparing for this, but now that she was here, it didn't feel right. The pressure of being the future of the Thalrex weighed down on her, but her heart was elsewhere. She knew she had to be honest with them. Honest with herself. "The mission was successful, yes," Zorla replied, her voice steady. "But I must speak with you about something that weighs heavily on my heart. I have made a decision." A murmur of surprise rippled through the council members. Zorla paused, gathering her thoughts, unsure of how to continue. They had always seen her as the perfect princess, the perfect heir. But now she wasn't so sure of what was perfect anymore. "I have met someone," she said, her voice trembling slightly as she spoke the words out loud for the first time. "A human. His name is Lucas, and he has shown me a new way of living, one that doesn't require sacrifice. I want to be with him." The silence that followed was deafening. The council exchanged looks, their faces filled with shock and disbelief. Raltek's brow furrowed, and Sira's expression grew stern. "You are the princess of the Thalrex Empire," Raltek said, his voice cold. "Your duty is to your people. You cannot allow personal feelings to cloud your judgment. Your marriage is essential to securing our future, and it must be done with someone who can strengthen our alliances, not some human from a primitive world." Zorla felt a pang in her chest, but she stood firm. "I understand my duty, General. But what about my heart? I cannot live a life where I am forced to be something I am not. I want to lead, yes, but I want to do it with love, with someone who makes me feel complete. Lucas gives me that." "You are naive, Zorla," Syra interjected, her voice sharp. "You speak of love, but love does not build empires. Love does not conquer the stars. The Thalrex will fall if we do not maintain our strength and power. You cannot allow your emotions to guide you." Zorla's heart beat faster. She could feel the weight of their disapproval pressing in on her, but her mind was clear. She had lived her life according to their expectations for far too long. She had sacrificed her happiness, her sense of self, for the sake of an empire that demanded everything from her. But now, she was ready to take control of her own fate. "I will not be a ruler who sacrifices love for the sake of power," Zorla said, her voice steady. "I choose to live for myself, to lead with both my heart and my mind. I will not abandon my people, but I will not lose myself in the process." There was a long pause, and then Syra spoke again, her voice quieter but no less stern. "You may have the right to choose your heart, but your choices will have consequences. If you leave the Empire, if you turn your back on your duties, you may never be accepted again." Zorla nodded, understanding the gravity of her decision. "I am willing to face those consequences." The council members remained silent, their expressions unreadable. Zorla's heart pounded in her chest, but she knew in that moment that she had made the right choice. She would stand by Lucas, no matter what the future held. It was not a decision made lightly, but it was hers to make. As Zorla turned and left the great hall, the weight of her decision still pressing on her shoulders, she felt a sense of freedom she had never known before. She didn't know what the future would bring, but for the first time in her life, she was ready to face it on her own terms. The days following her decision were filled with uncertainty. Zorla had faced a turning point in her life, and though she had chosen the path that felt right to her, the weight of what she had left behind was not easy to carry. The council's disapproval still echoed in her mind, and the future of the Thalrex Empire seemed more fragile than ever. Yet, despite all the challenges that lay ahead, there was a sense of peace in her heart, something she had never known before. Zorla spent several days in the palace, reflecting on the conversation with the council and her decision to stay true to herself. There was no turning back now. She had chosen to live a life led by love, not by obligation. But as the days passed, she realized that the empire, her people, and even her family were not as far removed from her heart as she had thought. It wasn't long before Zorla found herself sitting alone in the grand gardens of the palace, a place she had often visited for quiet reflection. The flowers, exotic and vibrant, bloomed in the soft light of the morning. She could hear the distant hum of the palace and the occasional sound of her people going about their business. The sounds were familiar, but today they felt distant to her. As she sat there, lost in her thoughts, her mind drifted back to Earth, to Lucas. The thought of him brought warmth to her heart. He was waiting for her, even after all the uncertainties and the challenges they faced. She had no doubt that his love for her was genuine. But what about her love for him? Could she truly share her life with someone from such a different world? A human, a species so much less advanced than hers, yet in so many ways so much richer in the ways that mattered. Zorla had always known that she would lead the Thalrex Empire, but the weight of leadership had always been tied to sacrifice. She had assumed that ruling was about power, control, and maintaining an unbreakable status quo. But Lucas had shown her another way, a way to lead with compassion, with empathy, and with love. Her thoughts were interrupted by the soft sound of footsteps behind her. She turned to see her older brother, Prince Kalen, approaching. Kalen had always been a pillar of strength in the Empire, and Zorla had looked up to him for much of her life. He had always been the one to take charge when their father was unavailable, the one to make tough decisions, and the one who had always stood by her side. "Zorla," he said, his voice gentle. "I've been looking for you." Zorla gave him a small smile, though she could sense the seriousness in his tone. "What's wrong, Kalen?" He paused for a moment, as if choosing his words carefully. "I know you've made your decision, but I need you to understand something." Zorla's heart beat faster. "What do you mean?" "You're not just a princess, Zorla," Kalen continued. "You're our future, the Empire's future. You were born to lead. And if you walk away from that, it won't just affect you, it will affect everyone. You're not just choosing your own path, you're choosing the path of the Thalrex people." Zorla's eyes narrowed slightly. "I understand that, Kalen. But this isn't just about the Empire. It's about who I am. I want to lead, yes, but I want to lead with love. I can't ignore my heart anymore." Kalen sighed, sitting down beside her. "I know, Zorla. I know you've always been kind-hearted. You've always wanted to help our people to make the Empire a better place. But sometimes, doing what's right means making hard choices, and the hardest choice is often the one that involves sacrifice." Zorla looked at him, her eyes filled with determination. "I've already made my choice, Kalen. I want to be with Lucas, and I want to lead in a way that doesn't tear me apart inside. I'm not saying I'll abandon my duties, but I won't. Do it if it means giving up everything that makes me human." Her brother looked at her for a long moment before he spoke again. "I've always admired your strength, Zorla. You've always had a way of seeing the world differently, of finding solutions where others see none. But this is different. You're going to have to convince not just the council, but our entire people that they can trust you, that you're still the ruler they need, despite the personal choices you're making." Zorla nodded. "I know, and I'll do everything I can to prove that. I can't promise them that things will stay the same. I can only promise that I'll try to make things better. That's all I've ever wanted." Kalen placed a hand on her shoulder. "I believe in you, Zorla, but just know that it won't be easy. There will be challenges ahead, but I'll stand by you no matter what." Zorla smiled, feeling a wave of gratitude for her brother's support. She had always known that Kalen was the pillar of the Empire, but in this moment she realized that he had also been her anchor. She wasn't alone in this fight. As the days passed, Zorla began to prepare for the most difficult challenge of her life, addressing her people. The council had been clear. They would not accept a leader who made personal choices at the expense of the Empire's stability. But Zorla knew she had to stand her ground. She had to show them that leadership wasn't just about power or authority. It was about making choices that mattered, choices that respected both her people and her heart. She called for an assembly, gathering the most influential leaders of the Thalrex Empire. The Great Hall was filled with people who had watched her grow, people who had believed in her since. She was a child. The tension was thick as Zorla stood before them, ready to make her case. "I know many of you have doubts," she began, her voice steady, "but I'm asking you to trust me. I am still your princess, still your heir, and I will lead with everything I have. But I ask that you respect my decision. I choose love, and I choose a path that will make me a stronger leader. A leader who doesn't just rule with power, but with empathy and understanding." Her words hung in the air, and for a long moment, there was silence. The faces of the council were unreadable, but Zorla could feel the weight of their judgment. Would they accept her, or would they cast her aside? Finally, High Advisor Sira spoke. "You've always been our brightest hope, Zorla. If you believe that this path will make you a better leader, then we will support you. But remember, love cannot shield you from the challenges of ruling. It will test you in ways you cannot imagine. Zorla nodded. I understand, advisor, and I'm ready for those challenges. As she left the hall, she knew that her journey was just beginning. The road ahead would not be easy, but she was determined to walk it with love, with strength, and with the belief that she could create a future where her heart and her duty could coexist. The days that followed Zorla's speech were filled with both tension and hope. After addressing the council and her people, she had gained some support, but the path ahead was far from clear. There were whispers among the leaders of the empire, and Zorla knew that her decision had not won everyone over. Many were still hesitant, unsure of what a ruler who followed her heart would mean for the Thalrex Empire. Zorla spent hours in quiet reflection, weighing her options. She had always been a person of action, but now, more than ever, she felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on her. She had made the decision to choose love, to choose Lucas, but there was a part of her that feared what might be lost in the process. What if her people rejected her? What if her love for Lucas could never truly exist in harmony with the Empire's needs? Despite these fears, Zorla was not one to shy away from challenges. She had always believed that the strength of a leader came not from their ability to command, but from their ability to listen, to understand, and to make choices based on what was right, not just for their people, but for themselves. She would face the consequences of her decision, whatever they may be, but she would do so with her heart open and her mind clear. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the stars began to appear in the sky, Zorla stood at the palace balcony, her thoughts far away. The soft breeze of the evening air caressed her face, and she closed her eyes, imagining Lucas standing beside her. She had promised him that she would come back to him, and she was determined to keep that promise. But she knew that this journey would be unlike anything she had ever faced before. The sound of footsteps behind her broke her reverie, and she turned to see Kalen walking towards her, his expression serious. Her brother had always been a constant presence in her life, offering both guidance and support, but Zorla could sense that something was different in his demeanor. Zorla, Kalen said, his voice quiet but firm. There's something you need to know. Zorla's heart skipped a beat. What is it? Kalen hesitated for a moment before speaking. There are factions within the Empire who are not happy with your decision. They are questioning your ability to lead, and some are even calling for your removal as heir. They believe that a ruler who chooses love over duty cannot be trusted to lead. Zorla felt a pang of fear deep in her chest, but she held her ground. I knew there would be challenges, Kalen, but I can't go back. I made my choice, and I will stand by it. I understand, Kalen said, stepping closer, but I'm warning you, this won't be easy. There are powerful people who won't let go of their expectations. They will fight against you, and they will fight against Lucas. Zorla looked out over the city, her mind racing. She had always known that choosing love would come with consequences, but hearing Kalen's words made it all the more real. Still, she refused to let fear guide her actions. I've made my choice, she repeated, her voice steady, and I won't back down. If the Empire rejects me for following my heart, then maybe it's not the Empire I should be leading. Kalen's gaze softened as he placed a hand on her shoulder. You've always had the strength to follow your own path, Zorla. But remember, the people are watching you. They need to see that you can balance love with duty, not just one or the other. Zorla nodded, understanding the weight of his words. She would not only have to prove herself to the council and her people, but also to herself. She would show them that she could lead with both love and strength, that it was possible to be both a ruler and someone who followed her heart. Later that evening, Zorla sat in her chambers, staring out at the stars. Her mind was filled with plans for the future. She knew that her decision would not be easily accepted by all, but she also knew that her people needed a leader who could inspire change. She would show them that love was not a weakness, but a strength, a force that could unite rather than divide. The next day, Zorla called for another assembly. This time she would speak not just to the council, but to the people of the Thalrex Empire. She had made a promise to Lucas, and she intended to keep it. But she also knew that she had to demonstrate to her people that love and leadership could coexist. As she stood before the assembly, Zorla could feel the weight of the eyes upon her. She had always been the center of attention, but this was different. This time, she was not just a princess speaking to her people. She was a leader who had to prove that she was worthy of their trust. "I know many of you are unsure of my decision," Zorla began, her voice calm but strong. "But I ask you to listen with open hearts. I have chosen a path that may seem uncertain, but it is one that I believe will make me a better leader. I am not asking you to agree with me. I am asking you to trust me." She paused, her gaze sweeping across the room. Leadership is not about power or control. It's about understanding, about compassion, and about making the difficult choices that will lead to a better future for all. My love for Lucas does not make me weak. It makes me stronger. It reminds me that I am human, and that being human is the greatest strength a leader can have. There was a long silence in the hall as her words echoed in the air. Zorla could feel the tension, but she also felt something else, a flicker of hope. She had spoken from the heart, and now it was up to her people to decide if they would accept her as their ruler, not just as a princess, but as someone who understood the value of love and leadership. After a long moment, the High Advisor, Sira, stood up. The room held its breath, awaiting her response. Sira's expression was unreadable as she addressed the assembly. "You speak of love, Princess Zorla," Sira said slowly, "and perhaps there is wisdom in your words. But remember, it is not just your heart that will guide you. It is your actions. You will be tested, and we will watch." Zorla met Sira's gaze, her resolve unwavering. "I understand, and I will prove that love and leadership can thrive together." The room was still, but Zorla could feel a shift. It was small, but it was there. Her people were listening, and that was the first step toward building a future where love and duty could coexist. The weeks following Zorla's speech in the Great Hall were a time of uncertainty, but also of change. The atmosphere within the Thalrex Empire was thick with both doubt and anticipation. Some voices spoke of rebellion, while others began to rally behind the princess, inspired by her courage and the sincerity in her words. Zorla knew that the path ahead would be filled with challenges, but she was no longer afraid. She had made her choice, and she would see it through, no matter what. Zorla spent much of her time in the palace, consulting with her advisors, her brother Kalen, and those who still supported her. The road ahead was not easy, but she had begun. To see that change could come, even in the most ancient and established of empires. There were factions in the council who still resisted her leadership, but they were becoming fewer, and those who saw her as a symbol of hope were growing in number. Her thoughts often turned to Lucas, whom she had promised to return to. She had not yet been able to leave the empire fully, as there was much work to be done. But every day, her longing to be with him grew stronger. It was not just his love that she missed. It was the way he made her feel alive, the way he reminded her of the simplicity of living, of caring for others, and of finding joy in small moments. These were things she had long forgotten, as she had been trained to focus on power and responsibility. One evening, as the stars began to appear in the sky, Zorla sat in the royal gardens, her mind heavy with the decisions she had made. The cool, night air wrapped around her like a comforting embrace, and she closed her eyes, imagining Lucas beside her. She had told him that she would return, and she had meant it. But she also knew that her return would not be a simple one. Her brother, Kalen, joined her in the garden, his presence a steady reminder of the strength and stability the Empire needed. He sat beside her, his face thoughtful. "You're thinking of him again, aren't you?" Kalen said, his tone gentle. It was not a question, but an understanding. Zorla nodded, her gaze fixed on the stars above. "I miss him. I miss the simplicity of what we shared. It's strange, Kalen. I've spent my entire life preparing for this role, and now I feel as if I'm being pulled in two directions: my duty to my people and my love for Lucas." Kalen sighed softly, placing a hand on her shoulder. "I know it's not easy, Zorla, but you've always known that leadership would require sacrifices. It's just that now, those sacrifices are different. You're learning to balance your heart with your duty, and that is not something that many rulers can do." Zorla looked at him, a flicker of doubt in her eyes. "But what if it's too much? What if I fail?" Kalen smiled warmly at her. "You've never failed before, Zorla. You're not someone who gives up when things get tough. You've always fought for what you believed in, and I know you will continue to do so. You'll find a way to make it work. You just have to trust yourself." Zorla turned her gaze back to the stars, her thoughts swirling. Kalen was right. She had always been determined to follow her heart, to fight for what she believed in. Now she had to apply that same determination to lead her people and to be with Lucas. She had learned that leadership wasn't about pleasing everyone or maintaining control. It was about finding the strength to stay true to herself, even when it was difficult. The next day, Zorla stood before her council once more. She had gathered them to discuss the next steps for the Empire and to show them that her leadership was not just about her personal choices, it was about the future of the Thalrex people. She had made it clear that she would not be swayed by the pressures of tradition. But she also understood the importance of balancing her personal desires with her responsibilities. "I know many of you still have doubts," she began, her voice steady and strong. "But I ask you to look at the future, not just the past. The Empire has been strong for centuries because of our unity, our determination, and our wisdom. But the world is changing, and we must change with it. My love for Lucas does not make me weak. It makes me stronger. It reminds me of what is important: empathy, connection, and understanding." The council members listened carefully, and Zorla could see the shift in their expressions. Some were still resistant, but others were beginning to open their minds to the idea of change. They had seen the power of her words, and now they were beginning to see the power of her actions. "I will not abandon my people," Zorla continued, "but I will not sacrifice my happiness either. We must learn to embrace the future, with all its challenges and uncertainties. I believe that I can lead with both love and strength, and I ask you to give me that chance." After a long silence, one of the council members, a woman named Lyra, spoke up. "You've shown us that love can be a force for good, Princess. Perhaps it is time for us to embrace a new way of leading, one that considers not only the needs of the Empire, but the hearts of its people." The room was still, but Zorla could feel a change in the air. The council was beginning to shift, and she knew that this was just the beginning. The road ahead would not be easy, but Zorla was no longer afraid. She had made her decision, and she would face whatever came next with the strength and determination she had always known. That evening, Zorla sent a message to Lucas, telling him that she was finally ready to join him. The message was simple, but the words were filled with all the love and hope she had kept hidden for so long. "I'm coming, Lucas. I've made my peace, and I've made my choice. I'll be with you soon." As she stood in her chamber, gazing out at the stars once more, Zorla felt a sense of peace settle in her heart. The future was uncertain, but she knew that with Lucas by her side, she could face anything. She had chosen a path of love, of leadership, and of strength, and now it was time to walk that path, hand in hand with the one she loved. The journey ahead would be long, but it was one Zorla was ready to take. The stars above seemed brighter than ever, and for the first time in her life she knew that the universe was full of possibilities.